If you've been navigating the world of fertility treatment, you've probably seen it. That statistic that can be kind of frustrating.
Hmm.
The one where published IVF success rates just seem higher in private clinics than in public hospitals.
They often do, yeah.
Yeah,
And it really makes you wonder what's going on behind the numbers.
exactly. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do a deep dive into that.
And we really need to look past the marketing here. The goal for us, based on the sources you shared, is to break down why that disparity exists. We'll be focusing on, the biology, the lab science, and clinical workflow.
This isn't about saying private is better.
Not at all. It's about analyzing the differences in the systems. We're talking logistics, flexibility, and precision.
Okay, let's dive right in then. The sources suggest the core difference isn't really about the doctors or the embryologists being better in one place or another. It's the process.
It's the structure, exactly.
So let's start at the beginning of a cycle. With the protocols, it's this idea of individualized versus standardized treatment. What does that standardization look like in a big, high-volume public system?
Well, you have to think about the sheer scale. Public hospitals have these immense workloads, very strict scheduling limits, and that means they have to be efficient.
They have to keep things moving.
They have to. So they use standardized protocols that are designed to work well for let's say, the average patient.
But IVF is anything but average, isn't it? It's so personal. So what happens if your body is responding a little faster or a bit slower than that fixed schedule?
And that's the key question. The consequence is lost optimization. There's just very little room to adjust on the fly.
So if the schedule says monitoring ends at 5 p.m.,
Then it ends at 5 p.m.
Yeah.
Even if your hormones are peaking at 7 p.m., they can't just wait for that perfect biological moment because the system isn't built for it. That ability to react instantly, that's the difference between a good egg and a great one.
and this is where the private model comes in with its flexibility.
Exactly. Private clinics can practice true individualization because they have the logistical freedom to do it. They can adjust a dose by a tiny amount. They can push a retrieval by a few hours.
They're chasing biology, not the calendar.
A perfect way to put it. They prioritize optimization over standardization.
And you can't optimize without data,
Yeah.
which connects directly to monitoring, right?
You are absolutely right. The monitoring is crucial. The sources point to much more frequent monitoring in private settings. More scans, more blood work.
Multiple times a day if needed.
If needed, yes. They're tracking progesterone with extreme precision. And all that data lets them pinpoint the perfect timing for retrieval and later on for the transfer.
Okay, so that's a huge difference in the clinical workflow. Now let's move into the lab, because what happens after the retrieval? That's where the tech really comes into play.
This is kind of the unseen part of the journey for most people, but it's so critical. And the investment differences can be pretty stark.
What kind of differences?
Well, for one, you often have dedicated embryologists who only do IVF. They're not rotating through other hospital departments. And second, there's a heavy investment in the lab environment itself. Optimized gas systems, specialized air filtration, creating a perfect little microclimate.
And what's the one piece of tech that really stands out?
The sources all seem to point to the time-lapse incubators. They're a real game changer.
Explain what they do.
So these incubators have built-in cameras. They let the embryologists watch the embryos develop 24/7 without ever having to take them out of that stable, perfectly controlled environment.
So you're not disturbing them at all.
Exactly. You minimize stress. And that continuous video gives them so much information about which embryo is the strongest.
And why can private systems adopt tech like this so much faster?
It really just comes down to capital and, frankly, bureaucracy. Private clinics are pushed by competition to reinvest in the latest tech to attract patients.
If something new comes out, they can just buy it.
Pretty much. Whereas a public hospital might face a really long, complex procurement process that can take years, even for proven technology.
That makes sense. And that hurdle probably explains the gap in some of the more advanced diagnostic tests, too.
It does, and we should probably talk about some of those.
Yeah, let's define them. What are we talking about specifically?
We're talking about tools for when a standard cycle isn't giving you answers. For the embryo, there's PGTA, which screens for the right number of chromosomes.
Okay.
For sperm issues, you have things like PICSI or MSI, which are these really advanced ways of selecting the single best sperm.
And what about for the uterus? For the person carrying the pregnancy?
Great point. There you have tests like the ERA, Emma, and Alice. The ERA test, for instance, looks at the uterine lining on a genetic level to find the absolute perfect window for transfer.
So you're not guessing about the timing?
You are removing the guesswork.
Yeah.
And Emma and Alice look at the endometrial microbiome,
Yeah.
which we now know is super important for an embryo to implant.
But here's a critical question the sources also bring up. With all these tests available, is there a risk of, over-testing, adding huge costs for people who might not need it?
That is a very important point. Yes, these tools are powerful, but they are most effective when they're truly indicated.
So for someone with a history of failed transfers or who is older,
Exactly. The key isn't to use them on everyone, but to have them readily available for the patients who really need them, so they aren't stuck in a cycle of trial and error.
okay, one last thing on the lab front. Cryopreservation, freezing embryos.
Paramount. A high-quality cryolab with a ton of experience in vitrification, it's the flash freezing method, gets much, much better results with frozen embryo transfers. Experience really matters there.
Okay, so we've covered workflow and tech.
Right.
Let's move to a factor that can really distort the numbers. Patient demographics.
Yeah, this is a big one. We have to be really fair when we compare clinics.
What do you mean?
We have to understand that private centers, generally speaking, see younger patients and less complex cases, especially earlier in their journey. They're often the first stop.
Which means the public centers are, by default, taking on the really challenging cases.
Exactly. The public hospitals often act as referral centers. They get the older patients, the ones with complex medical issues, the ones who have already failed multiple cycles somewhere else.
So their patient mix is just tougher from the start.
It's much tougher. And when you have a higher percentage of difficult cases, your average success rate is just mathematically going to be lower. It's unavoidable, even if the care is excellent.
That's a really important context. Now, what about holistic support? The sources mention this idea of integrated care. Does that actually move the biological needle?
The research is getting clearer and clearer. Yes, it does. Big time.
How so?
Well, we know that stress hormones, like cortisol, can interfere with the hormones you need for a good ovarian response and for uterine receptivity.
Mm.
Integrated care, which is often more robust in private settings, helps manage that.
So having access to, say, a psychologist is actually a clinical tool, not just a nice to have.
Precisely. It can lead to lower stress, better hormonal balance, and even helps people stick to their complex medication schedules. Plus, you see more multidisciplinary teams.
Like nutritionists and gastrologists.
Exactly. Nutritionists working on egg quality, psychologists, endocrinologists, they're all part of the plan, treating the whole person, not just the reproductive system.
So let's try to synthesize all this for someone listening. What's the big takeaway?
The big takeaway is that public clinics are absolutely essential. They provide access to care and are the backbone of the system.
Mm-hmm.
But private clinics are structurally optimized.
They're not enemies. They're just two different parts of the same ecosystem.
That's the perfect way to see it. IVF success depends on perfect timing and a perfect environment. Private systems are just, by their nature, designed to eliminate logistical hurdles to deliver that precision.
So connecting this back to the listener, when does this investment in precision and flexibility become the most critical?
The sources are pretty clear on this. The need for that rapid, individualized care goes way up when you're dealing with specific challenges.
Like what?
It becomes especially important if you are age 35 or older, or if you have signs of a low ovarian reserve, like a low AMH or a low antral follicle count.
What about if you've been through this before?
Yes. If you've had a poor response to stimulation meds in the past, or a history of 2 or more failed transfers, or poor embryo quality, that's when you really need to drill down.
And I'm guessing that includes conditions like endometriosis, adenomyosis, or immune factors, right? The cases that need those deep diagnostics we talked about.
Absolutely. In those situations where you're trying to overcome a very specific biological hurdle, every little bit of optimization, every available tool, it all matters immensely.
So at the end of the day, it's that investment in an immediate, individualized response. That's what can fundamentally change the potential outcome, especially for those tougher cases.
And we absolutely have to finish by stressing one thing. This whole discussion is strictly educational. It's an analysis of systems and logistics from the sources.
It is not medical advice.
It is not medical advice. Any decision you make about your care must always be with your own fertility specialist.
And if you want to find more information and resources about the complete IVF process, you can visit the portal ivf4me.com. That's IVF for me.